Hey, Nat.
Nice to see you.
Grab a seat. Hi, Charles. Thank you very much indeed. I'll leave it to you.
Where would you like me? Over here?
Head over here. This is my good side, so I always like to sit on this side. Hello. Morning. Are you having a good morning so far? Good. So are we. I shall introduce you to Charles in just a moment, but I thought it would be nice to begin the session with a little moment, a breath or two, and just acknowledging the land and the waters here. So just giving thanks to all beings, the waters and the land we're here to create greater harmony with. I think that's kind of the intention of this summit. The River Avon, just out here, the River Frome, a few hundred meters down there, and many other streams flowing out to the Bristol Channel. Giving thanks to the land here and acknowledging the history here in the prop yard as a former MOD torpedo testing site, and asking that the conversations and discussions here today may serve the greater good for personal and planetary healing. So, on to the session today. I was going to set the scene about the sort of state of the oceans and the world. And then I came across Charles's last chapter last night doing my homework, which was the best kind of homework. And I thought I would start with his words. So, your words trying to sum up the position in which we find ourselves, the health of our oceans, on which our own health ultimately depends, is in decline, partly due to greenhouse gas emissions. Year on year, the oceans of the world have acidified by a fraction, have less oxygen, and are warmer. The warming is causing the death of coral, rising sea levels, and changing the ocean currents. The ocean's also under pressure from pollution in the form of plastics, though this is not the greatest ocean-based problem. That is overfishing, mostly subsidized industrial fishing. It's destroying biodiversity, the resilience of habitats, and robbing the world's poor of food. We now discover it may be having as much impact on the climate as the global aviation industry. Mangroves, seagrasses, and kelp forests are still being destroyed, despite the fact that they soak up many times more carbon than forests on land. It's a pretty daunting litany of ills. So for this session, how do we rewild the sea? We're going to dive into one man's journey, and his team, of course, his approach to protecting and restoring the seas, and to hopefully give you all a few doses of much-needed ocean optimism as we go. So Charles Clover, welcome.
Thank you.
Shall we give him a round of applause? I think you just had a bit of an intro, but Charles is the co-founder and full-time senior advisor of the Blue Marine Foundation. He made his name as an environmental journalist, writing for the Sunday Times and the Daily Telegraph, for which you were environment editor for 22 years. And you may, sorry, this has just come undone. You may have heard of Charles through his incredible book, The End of the Line, which was then made into that phenomenal documentary, which was such a wake-up call for myself and many of us, I'm sure, here, as to the dangers of overfishing. I'll stop talking now and ask you a question. So, Charles, what do you think's changed over the last 20 years that you've been immersed in ocean health, and for the good and for the bad?
Well, I think, Natalie, you perfectly encapsulated what's going wrong. I think what's happened in the last 20 years is that some things have started to go right, and they are having an incredibly fast impact. To give some examples, we have seen in the last 20 years, thanks to a campaign that The End of the Line, the film, was part of, we've seen the restoration of the bluefin tuna. The bluefin tuna was absent from our waters for 70 years, and finally they actually did the right thing. They set the level at which it could be exploited at the right level, and suddenly it's back. It's back off Falmouth. It's back off Sussex, as I discovered the other day. It's back off in the Celtic Sea, off Ireland, even off Norway, where it hasn't been for 70 years. So there are some fisheries management successes, and we should build on them. These are putting back things that should be part of the ecosystem, that make the ecosystem function. There have been great successes in declaring the blue belt, thanks to some of our Blue Marine Foundation team sitting in the front row. A huge campaign by many NGOs, including RSPB, to get the blue belt declared around the British Overseas Territories. 4.2 million square kilometres of protected sea and counting, because more and more overseas territories want to join it. What else is good? I mean, we've actually had some successes which have happened, which we have organised and which we have helped sustain in Lyme Bay and in the Sussex Bay, which are showing astonishing results astonishingly quickly. That's my summary.
Yeah, well, let's dive into some of those projects in a bit later. I'd love to see, has anybody in the audience read Rewilding the Sea? Yeah, the great show of hands there. Well done, Charles. It really reads as such a heartening, it's sobering on one hand, because you don't shy away from the issues that our oceans are facing, but so heartening in terms of the number of projects that you've been involved with through Blue, that I think for anybody interested in ocean conservation and feeling like they need that sense of how quickly nature can restore when we slightly step out, well, not step out, slightly step out, get out the way. So you focus mainly on overfishing. Do you think that's the key focus when it comes to the oceans, when there are so many issues facing our oceans? Is that the silver bullet?
I think it is. I think it's the win-win-win, because what has not been understood until now is this little ghetto of fisheries management. It's not about just the fish. It's about the whole health of the ocean. We need to rewild the ocean for climate change reasons, for biodiversity reasons. We stop killing all the things we kill when we catch the fish, and stop killing too many fish. And we need to rewild the ocean for our own food security. We were getting 70% of our cod from Russia until the 22nd of February last year. Why was that a good idea? We had let our cod populations languish. The fishing industry's narrative, it's about climate change. No, it isn't. We were taking more than scientific advice for 35, 40 years. You're going to kill any animal if you do that. It's just pretty obvious to me.
Yeah, the book is full of facts and figures and stories that just blow your mind in terms of the quantities that are being taken from the seas, but also the forces that we're up against, which we'll come to in a moment. But I just wanted to check in as a writer as well. What inspired you to write this book now, or rather last year when it was published?
It was the positivity. I think that the world needs positive examples. Otherwise, the environmental story is too negative and too depressing. The ocean is different to the climate. It's actually bigger. It's deeper and bigger than the climate, and it is the other great commons. But the message of this great commons is that you can rewild it in bits. Other people may destroy their own waters, but we can restore ours. And it's immensely cheering when you see that happen. I have a constant conversation with a man called Eric Smith, who appears in the last chapter, who is a 70-year-old free diver from Shoreham in Sussex. And we keep exchanging examples, because people send them to me, and I send them to Eric, and, of what's coming back after the trawling ban in the Sussex kelp belt. Somebody was diving off Brighton at the weekend, and he says, I can't believe it. Normally these shallow dives on the slopes just off the Brighton beach are profoundly depressing. That it's trawled territory, there's nothing there. And this time there was a bed of oysters that was the size of several tennis courts. Yay. And it's just come back. It wasn't there a couple of years ago. And on it were, for some reason, there's a symbiosis between plaice and mussels. Mussels. Did I say oysters? I meant mussels. mussels have come back. And the mussels are stabilizing the seabed, and for some reason, I think because the plaice eat their spat, there are plaice everywhere. And there are other creatures that are coming back. It's really rather heartening.
It really was. That was one of my favorite examples. I mean, they were all incredible. There's about 6 examples in here of particular rewilding or sea wilding projects that have happened that you've been involved with. But there was that fact that more than 90% of the kelp that was in the waters off Sussex, more than 90% of the kelp that was there in the 1950s has gone. And just to see how quickly that's come about, and that was through an example of activism and campaigning through Eric, wasn't it, on the south coast. Within 2 months, the kelp bed had erupted along a mile of inshore reef and was 600 meters wide. Within 2 months, that's just astonishing. And it's just such a great example of how quickly then the biodiversity returned to that.
If you leave nature alone, it's astonishing what comes back. The messages for the sea are very simple. Manage it according to scientific advice, don't exceed it, and leave areas where you don't do anything at all, and you let nature do the management. So,
unbelievably, we only got a 20-minute session with Charles, so I'm going to try and rattle through some questions a bit quickly. But I was going to mention that I'd heard John Elkington and Paul Hawken talking about carbon tunnel syndrome when it comes to nature recovery and describing the pitfalls of an overfocus on carbon. And I was going to talk to you about that, but then after reading your book, I think it's actually really important what you're talking about here, about we have to consider the possibility that clearing the rainforest and trawling are comparable activities. So tell us a little bit about carbon and the ocean.
We haven't started to develop our approach to the ocean in terms of climate. We haven't really started at all. We've started with mangroves and seagrass and salt marsh. We haven't got beyond the coastal margin. We haven't even scientifically researched what the seabed is soaking up or the damage that is being caused by trawling and dredging the seabed, which a controversial but nevertheless extremely distinguished Enrique Sala paper has said is the equivalent of the entire global aviation industry. If there are alternatives to trawling, and even the Norwegians, who are a big fishing nation, think there are, then why aren't we using them? There are no policy drivers. It's not in the Paris Agreement. There's a huge amount of work to do. IPCC hasn't done the work yet. UNFCCC says, oh no, we don't want you ocean boys doing anything. We don't want you here because it'll be hot air. The Chinese will just use it to offset their coal-fired power stations. This is a council of despair. We should be doing everything at once, and we should definitely be allowing the ocean to help us. God knows, I make the analogy that it's a game show, the climate change business, and we aren't actually getting many of the questions right.
I think just to sort of highlight that if anyone didn't see that study that came out in 2021 that said that bottom trawling releases the same amount of CO2 as the entire aviation industry, and it's that thing of it being out of sight that, so it's so important that you're bringing attention to that.
And we're doing, to finish off that thought, we have managed to persuade a very big insurance company, Convex, to spend $15 million on researching the carbon uptake of the continental shelves, and that is globally. And that will start that process of including the ocean in our climate discussion, where it has been quite disgracefully left out. And that will have implications for fishing, I'm afraid.
There's another statistic here on that subject that I loved. If whales were allowed to return to their pre-whaling numbers of 4 to 5 million, up from 1.3 million today, the IMF says they could capture 1.7 billion tons of CO2 annually. That's roughly Russia's total annual emissions, just by letting whales return to their pre-whaling state. Great stuff. So
fish too. Fish are carbon as much as whales are, and they have the same kind of pump that whales have. and fish embody carbon. So we should be managing fish not to the maximum sustainable yield, but to the maximum carbon retention. We haven't got a concept of that into fisheries management yet, but we should have. Fish, apparently, according to a paper by Yale University, fish soak up the equivalent of twice the emissions of the EU 27 every year. So fish are even more effective at soaking up carbon than whales are. So why aren't we managing them better?
Good question. You do pretty much answer it in your book. In terms of your success stories, blue success stories, there are so many in this book, too many for us to go into. There's Chagos, Lyme Bay, Solent, the Essential Islands, Dogger Bank, Sussex kelp. What do you feel is the one you'd like to talk about now, or the one that people could get behind and support, or ones we could replicate?
I think it's the Sussex Bay, because Eric is always saying to me, and now why don't we ban trawling in all our inshore waters? That's what he says. Because everyone would gain. It's a win-win-win. We did it in Lyme Bay. We got 4 times the number of commercially harvestable fish, 4 times the number of species, and much happier fishermen because they didn't have to fish so long to catch what they did.
So what does it need for us to be able to replicate that around the coast of the UK?
It needs consciousness, and it's beginning to dawn, I think. It's only 25 years since the ocean was in an absolutely parlous state, and I wrote up that in The End of the Line. And since then, things have got better. But there are now 2 narratives competing. And people just need to know, this audience particularly needs to know, that we just need the right narrative to win. We've got to include these ocean things in climate change discussions, because it will help us stop climate change. And we've got to stop stupid things happening, and we've got to have a policy of stopping stupid things happening and restoring our seas.
Quick one, the Global Oceans Treaty, signed last month. When do you think we'll see some implementation and impact coming from that?
This is the biodiversity convention thing that was signed and agreed in Montreal last December. It takes an awfully long time to get these things ratified. People are hoping that it will be ratified in a rush in about 2025. The UN committee are hoping to get lots of nations. I think it needs about 100 nations, so it's a lot to ratify it in 2025, which seems a long way away. But then you will be able to, something like half the planet's surface is the high seas. So if you can't create marine reserves on half the planet's surface, that is nuts. This treaty, once it's in force, will enable that to happen. And there's some low-hanging fruit, which Blue Marine is working on, such as the Walvis Ridge, huge, huge area between Tristan da Cunha and St. Helena. Vast area, South Africa, Namibia involved, but friendly countries, huge area, huge amounts to gain from actually protecting that as a marine protected area. And there are dozens around the world of areas that rich that need protecting in the high seas.
Can I get a time check, please? I have no idea how long we've been going or how long I've got left. 2 more questions with long answers.
Short answers. Okay, shorter answers.
So, from the point of view of the audience, the best ways that we here can support the rewilding of the seas, what are the top 3 things? Maybe 3 for business, 3 for individuals.
That consciousness that there are 2 narratives, just back the right one. There's one's going down, one's going up. Just why wouldn't we do more of the one that's going up? Just that's what your business needs to know. And then in the second message is invest in it. We're having all sorts of discussions about how you can invest in it. We haven't got that quite sorted out yet. But find your way in your business of investing in that positive narrative. Third, I can't think.
Individually?
Individually, it's about what you buy, I'm afraid. And the MCS Good Fish Guide is very good. There are now, sadly, 2 more zero TAC species, thanks to our constant mismanagement of our waters. It's the South Coast pollock and the Irish sea plaice, both things we shouldn't eat. It keeps changing what you shouldn't eat. And basically, never eat farmed salmon. It is a disgraceful way of using the sea.
Thank you. Proudest moment in your career, because there have been some incredible achievements. So what do you personally feel most proud of?
This is a difficult one because a lot of it was achieved as part of teamwork. Things that I did, and I've had a long career. So I was a journalist for a very long time, and I feel very proud of getting Mrs. Thatcher's speech to the Royal Society about us conducting a gigantic experiment with the planet itself on the front page splash of the then great Daily Telegraph in 1988. No other paper splashed on it, no other paper had it on the front page. I put it there, I got it there. I feel very proud of that. I feel very proud, in a completely different context, of getting the first joint byline with the man who's now the king on a book about agricultural reform. And the process of talking about agricultural reform made me realize that you could reform fisheries management too. And so I moved on to that. And the proudest moment of my life with the people around me today was when was the premiere of a film I don't know if you've even seen, which is the film of The End of the Line. It's been overtaken by Seaspiracy and other consciousness-raising exercises, but The End of the Line really put it out there, and that was my proudest moment with my colleagues.
Yeah, agreed. It was completely game-changing, and there are so many more things that I'm sure your team and those that know you are incredibly proud of as well. So, last question, on a more personal note. I've only been at this for around 10 years and certainly feel the strain from time to time. How do you keep yourself motivated and connected to the cause?
I'm afraid the answer is simply anger. I mean, when 57% of your fishing opportunities are being allocated above scientific advice, you've just got to keep on going, haven't you? And we're going to sue the government this year or early next for doing that, because it is nuts. And we can't allow that to happen. And that was why I got into this, and I'm not getting out of this until we've sorted that out.
Yeah. It's a motivating force, isn't it? I said that I was going to do city to sea as long as it took for there to for a deposit return scheme to be in place, and the government keep kicking it down the line. I was like, I'm still here. So another couple of years, I think. I mean, so you started calling. I'm just about to finish. You called for 30% of the oceans to be protected by 2030. Way back in 2004. I think it was completely pioneering of you. When you started this with Blue, I think it was around 1.2% of the oceans protected. Is that right? Do you know what the figure is now?
It's over 8% in terms of notional protection. There are some paper parks in there, so the actual fully protected, can't fish, can't mine, can't drill for oil, 2.7%. But you know, as with Lion Bay, you can have quite a lot of sustainable uses going on in a protected area, as long as they're well managed and you can get returns. So it doesn't all have to be a no-take zone, but I believe that as the efficacy of these no-take zones becomes globally recognized, we will have more and more and more of them, and all we will do in the future is have marine reserves and we will fish the line around them, because they will be so productive.
Amazing. Well, I think it's okay to speak on behalf of the ocean that doesn't have a voice and say thank you for your life's work. It's truly inspirational, and I know what energy it takes to keep that going, and to your team at Blue as well. So can we give a huge round of applause to Charles?
Thank you, Natalie. And
Charles
I'm going to give plug for Natalie's book.
Thank you.